Okay, well, it's 12:05. We're going to go ahead and get started. So we are recording this for those that aren't able to make it. Um, and so this is our fifth day of marketing week. Throughout the whole week, it's been a success. We have some great speakers. A lot of members have learned many things. And so to end the week, we have Javier Cano, and um, he will be speaking on interview skills. So welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to speak with you today. I will go ahead and introduce myself and then talk a little bit about a couple of topics you'd mentioned. And of course, we'll leave plenty of time for questions. Want to let everybody know that what I'd like to do is create an interactive environment. So if I'm going along and you have a question regarding anything that I've got to say, please feel free to ask. I'm very interested in what is on your mind. I'm interested in what you're interested in knowing about. And I'm happy to share from my experience. So I'll go ahead and dive in. So as mentioned, my name is Javier Cano. I have the good fortune of being the area vice president for Marriott in Los Angeles. So I oversee all the Marriott full service hotels here in LA. In addition to that, I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the JW Marriott and the Ritz-Carlton Los Angeles, which is right across the street from Staples Center. And it's a 1,000-room hotel. It's a convention. Well, there's two hotels, one on top of the other, but 1,000 rooms between the two. Almost 900 in the JW and a little over 100 in the Ritz-Carlton. And we're mostly a convention hotel, which in day and age is a little tough because conventions aren't really happening. So we're just struggling to get by right now until such time that business gets a little bit better, which I'm very hopeful will be coming up here in the not too distant future, hopefully start of the year. So let me tell you a little bit about myself and my career. I was born in Los Angeles, and my entire family is from Mexico. I think I have maybe one or two relatives in this country, but everyone else is in northern Mexico. My father's family is all from Durango. My mom's family is all from the city of Chihuahua. And it has been a wonderful journey that I've been on. I was born in East LA, moved when I was young to the Midwest, and grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. And then when I got a chance to go off to college, I did not want to stay any place cold. So I decided to move south. And so I went to school not too far from there at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. So just up the road, and enjoyed my time in San Antonio. And that's where I first started working for Marriott as I was getting ready to finish school. And I was a marketing major. Enjoying that very much at the time, but was working I was working for Marriott, and they asked me to stick around. And I really hadn't thought about that, but they said, "Look, we think you're good at this stuff." So I stuck around, and I said I'd give it a try. And 42 years later, I'm still there. And so I am been working with Marriott for 42 years, started in San Antonio, and have worked at a number of different places. I told my company that I have a theory of life, which I follow, which is the palm tree theory of life. I will consider a job anywhere that palm trees grow outdoors naturally, because I like to stay warm. And so I have worked in a number of very nice places. If you count the fact I was born in LA, this is actually my fourth time through Los Angeles. In addition to that, I also worked in Mexico for several years. I worked in Puerto Vallarta at the Casa Magna Hotel there, and I also worked in Cancun as well. And so had an opportunity to work there for a couple of years. And so the nice thing about the hotel industry, for example, is that we typically don't build hotels in bad places. And so we've got opportunity to go to some really nice places along the way. Before I came back to Los Angeles and to have the job I have now, I had a hardship assignment for my company. I actually ran a hotel in the most remote place in the planet Earth, 5.5 hours by plane to the nearest landmass is where I worked. It's how remote this place was. And usually people give me a hard time after you hear the answer. But I was the general manager of the Ritz-Carlton on Maui. And although very remote, it's really a very beautiful place to be, and enjoyed that. So I was there about 5 years before returning here to Los Angeles. But I've been doing this a long time. I've been in the hotel business a long time. And as such, I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of people. I've hired an enormous number of people over the time, and have had an opportunity to connect with a lot of folks over the years. And I can tell you what I look for. I can tell you what is important to me when I go through and I talk to people. I recruit on college campuses. So as part of what I do, I've done that over the years as well. And I think there's a few things that are out there. And I want to start by talking about one of the things I think I'm passionate about, and one of the things that is important, that's baseball. How many of you out there are baseball fans? Raise a hands. Not okay. We got one baseball fan. All right. Here's the important thing about baseball. All the highest paid athletes in this sport in the world, every year, they return to spring training. And it's not like they've forgotten how to play this game. They've been playing it since they were 4 years old. But what they do is they drill on the fundamentals. The fundamentals is what they spend all spring training drilling on. It's not like they forgot where to throw the ball. They didn't forget how to run the bases, but it is all drilling on the fundamentals. So I think that's something important to think about when you start thinking about going into job interviews, when you start thinking about looking in the direction that you want to be able to go in terms of a career, companies you may be interested in. You got to start with the fundamentals. So the fundamentals, I believe, are you've got to know about the company or the person that you're interviewing with. You got to know something about it. So say you decide you want to work for Apple. Well, you got to know something about Apple. Right? When you sit down with an interviewer, and you're going to know who you're interviewing with more often than not. Look them up on LinkedIn. You need to know something about the person that is across from you. You've given them a resume. They know all about you. You don't know anything about them. So the fundamentals are really important. If you can find out one or two things that are important about what that person is like, you may be able to get a little bit of insight as to what makes them tick. Right? So the more you know, the better off you are prepared versus the person that they're going to interview after you. Right? So as you go through and you make a decision to say you want to work, I'm biased, for hotels, and you sit there and say, I want to work in this great hotel, and it is in, pick a city, someplace that, say you want to work in a fabulous resort somewhere in Florida. So you got to know about the hotel. You got to know something about, look at their website, look at some of what they've got on social media. Everything is out there. Do a little bit of homework. It is absolutely important that you know something about what it is that your company you're looking to talk to, and again, the person that you're talking to on the other side. All right. I think those are important things as you go through. Another thing you have to be, you're going to go through and you're going to interview with people. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions. You're going to go through, have a dialogue. And usually at the end of interviews, somebody's going to ask you, what questions do you have for me? You got to make sure that you have a question or two ready. And you can make it back to the person. Say, oh, I saw that you had worked in, this job or this location or for this company. Can you tell me a little bit about what you liked about it? Anything that you can do to get the other person to speak gives you a little bit of insight into what makes them tick, which can help you understand exactly what's important to that person. Because they have all the advantage because they've got all the information and you've got none as you walk in, unless you do a little bit of homework. Right? So have a question or two ready about the company, about the person. I think that is helpful. It shows that you've done a little bit of homework and you've got interest in the person that's across from you. Right? Sometimes you get asked questions and you're like, oh, I'm not sure I know the answer to What do you do? Well, you've got a couple things you can do. One of the things you can ask is you can ask the person to repeat the question. Gives you a second or two to come up with an answer for something if you really don't have one. The other thing you can do is you can ask the person to clarify the question. You can say, can you say that in another way? Can you repeat that question? Can you clarify that for me? Those are all perfectly okay things to do. And it'll buy you a little bit of time while you formulate your thoughts in terms of what the answer is that you're going to give. Right. I think that's also really, really important as you go through and talk about that. I think as you kind of go through and you take a look at entering the field in which you want to be in, you want to make sure that you're aware of, what's the company that you want to be part of? What do they stand for? Are they stand for the same thing you stand for? Because you don't want to get involved with the company and then find out that they are 100% the other direction on something you're passionate about. That's not going to be a long-term recipe for success. So again, as part of the homework, you want to make sure that you go through, because you don't want to waste somebody's time, and you don't want them wasting your time. So it's really important that you do a little bit of homework when it comes to that as well. And I think another point of this that is really important is when you go through and do a job interview and you're talking to somebody on the other side, you got to be yourself. And I look to hire the person. I don't look to hire somebody that is trying to be something they're not, or trying to be an image of something they think I want. No, I'm looking to hire the person. So I want to hire you. So be yourself is one of the biggest things I tell people. Just relax and be yourself. That's who I'm going to get all the time if I hire you. So that's the person I want to talk to. That's the worst person I want to engage in a conversation with. I want to know how you think. I want to know what's important to you. I want to know how it is you would handle certain situations. These things are important to go through and think about. Right. I'm going to take a breath here for a moment and find out, is any questions so far on anything that I've said, or anything that you'd like me to talk a little bit more about on anything that I brought forward so far? This is
Okay.
the audience participation part of the program too, by the way.
Of course. What are some, like, I know you were saying that whenever you hire someone, you look for someone who's authentic themselves. What is something that you would notice that, like, you can tell, like, this is not what I want, or like, what would be some red flags
Sure.
in a person?
Yeah, look, it's real easy, guys. You guys interact with people all the time. I guarantee you that if you were to sit there and you talk to 4 or 5 people, you would know immediately if one of those person was not authentic, was not genuine. The example I give to people all the time is if you go through a drive-through and you pull up and all of a sudden you hear, "Good afternoon, welcome to McDonald's, can I help you order, please?" Now, first of all, you don't understand half of that, but it's, if you go up to a McDonald's or something, there's nothing genuine about the conversation of somebody welcoming you on a drive-through, right? You guys talk to people all the time. You're in school, you're constantly having conversation. I guarantee you that any one of you in a heartbeat would be able to say, authentic or not, genuine or not. It is not hard to be able to distinguish between the two. Also, listen, you've been part of conversation when somebody's trying too hard. You're sitting there going, ooh, or you're watching somebody go, ooh, that person's trying too hard in that conversation. Again, the most important thing is to relax. I understand nervous. Nervous is different. When they start to talk a little faster, et cetera, et cetera. I get nervous, but generally what I try to do on my end is try to ask a few questions to make people not so nervous. Usually questions are asked about themselves. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What kind of hobbies do you have? What are the most? I ask people what they did in high school. Did you belong to any kind of a club, or were you involved in sports? Part of that, honestly, is to find out if somebody was an individual performer or if they were a team performer. If you were on a team versus, maybe you played on the tennis team or you were on the debate team or something where your individual skills were necessary to be successful. Versus, where it was on a sports team, a volleyball team or a basketball team or something that required a team effort to be successful, right? So some of those things are just things to try to make people feel more comfortable. But I think that being authentic and being genuine are absolutely essential, because you want the other person on the other side to be the same way. You don't want to go to work for somebody that was one way during an interview and you show up and they're a different way when they're done, right? Nobody wants to be in that situation.
Yeah, I really like that you brought up how you recommend interviewees to ask questions to the interviewers. I actually, there was this one place I interviewed for. It was for an internship, and they did tell me during the interview, don't be afraid to ask questions. You're also interviewing us to see if we're the right fit for you. Do you have any examples of questions that you would recommend, like to ask the interviewer?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that's a really good point, because the reality is you are interviewing them, right? You're entering the job market in a time, and you look around the numbers, and sometimes it may not feel like it, but there are way more jobs than people right now. There are way more jobs than people. The challenge you have is sometimes the jobs aren't where you want to be. Like, for example, the jobs can be in Fargo, North Dakota, and if you want to stay in the valley, you got to, you got to make some decisions there. But there are a heck of a lot more jobs out there than there are people. So at the same time, you're interviewing a company, you're interviewing people when they're interviewing you. So you can ask questions about, hey, talk to me about, what's important to you. What do you think that the thing that you would say the company stands for? You want to know if you have a particular area of passion. For example, if it's environmental concerns you have, can you tell me about what's your company's environmental policy? Are you working towards zero emissions, or anything that's in that space? I think shows your interest in what you have a passion for. Right. I think it's equally important to go through and say, what can you tell me if is this company growing? What's the future? What is the company trying to continue to do as far as their growth strategy for the next X amount of time, say the next year, 5 years, whatever it is. Because you also want to be able to ask questions about whether this is a growth company or a mature company. Is it something that's got a lot of opportunities for somebody that's coming into it? And you can ask that question. What kind of opportunities do you see for a person like me entering your company in the future? Where do you see a person like myself in 2 years being with your company? You can ask these things and say, okay, what do they see for a vision of somebody who is entering? Because remember, you're taking the first step on a professional career. And as a professional career, that track, that requires a couple things. Number one, it requires you have continuous learning. The day you leave school is the first day of continuous learning. You're going to learn for the rest of your life. And so the moment you leave, you got to continue to be adding to your skill set. Okay? You take a job for the reason of getting the next job. The day you start a job is the day you start working on your next job. And you got to start taking a look at that and say, where do I want to go from the job I take? What's my next step? You always got to be thinking a step or two ahead. If I take this job, where will that lead me to? Sometimes you take a step backwards. Sometimes you take a step sideways. If you got a company you really believe in and they didn't make you a job offer, get in the door. Doesn't matter where. Our industry, for example, anybody here interested in hotels, by the way? Come on, hotels are a great industry. Okay? You travel all over the world. You get to work in wonderful places. Look at all these places I worked in. I worked in Cancun. I worked in Puerto Vallarta, Los Angeles, Maui. Look at this.
I had recently been thinking about it, but because I'm a communication major with a concentration in advertising and public relations, so I thought it'd be cool to maybe do advertising or public relations for a hotel because of the travel. Yeah.
Yes, you basically get to travel for next to nothing anywhere in the world. So I get to stay. I've been with Marriott over 25 years. And what you do is then you have this thing that's called the Quarter Century Club. So in essence, I get free rooms at hotels around the world for the rest of my life. So that is a pretty cool benefit. And so if I want to go, and I just most recently went to Europe, I stayed at Marriott hotels in Amsterdam, and I stayed at them in Brussels, and I stayed in a number of really, really cool places. It's an awesome industry. Y'all should join. Okay, I'm done with my pitch on joining the hospitality industry. But I do think, look, I think it's important that you find out and know a little bit about what it is you're interested in doing. And if you've got a major like communications major, you can go anywhere. I'll tell you one quick story. I have 4 kids. I have 2 boys, 2 girls. So my youngest son was a senior in college, and so being a dad, I would say, okay, want to help you as you come out of school. What are you interested in? What kind of job? And he said, doesn't matter. Well, when you say something like that to a parent, it's about fall off my chair. It's like, what do you mean doesn't matter? He's in data. He works for big data. And he says to me, Dad, every company has big data. Everyone collects data. And says, so, man, it doesn't matter what the company is. It's just, where do I like, and where am I going to be comfortable working? So after I picked myself up off the floor and kind of thought about that, it was kind of true. So there was all kinds of crazy different companies that were wanting his skill set. But he's doing fine. He's working from home. He's got a great job. He's working in San Diego, which is where he wanted to live. But he just, he made himself available on the interviews to say he was good at what he did, basically, but was able to get to where he wanted to be by continuously interviewing companies that would get him to where he wanted to be. So the opportunities are there.
Well, I have a question, but a quick comment before the question. I'm actually a marketing major with a minor in hospitality and tourism, so I'm currently like exploring. But my question is, so a few weeks ago, our club was talking about how they should be open to opportunities, not really like have one set path, like they should consider other things. And so I know many members are marketing majors, others are like other business majors. And we were telling them it's okay to maybe pick up a marketing internship, maybe pick up a hospitality internship as well. So what advice would you give on that topic?
I think that you are touching on something which is unbelievably critical. The reality is you don't know what you don't know. So I think that if somebody, for example, really likes working with people, that is so unbelievably broad that it could be hospitality. It could be cruise lines. It could be all kinds of things where your skill set could match into a a totally different industry than the one you're thinking. You should, at this point in time, be open to looking at everything. You don't know what you could connect with that is out there. And the opportunities, honestly, are significant and they are endless in terms of being able to look. The last thing you want to do is get yourself into something and go, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. You make a really, really truthful assessment of what you like. And is equally important, what you don't like, right? You don't like sitting in an office or a cube for 8 hours a day, all right? That's going to mean that it's a job that you move around with. You don't want to only be doing one thing. You'd like to do various things, okay? So the more that you can put a list together of the things that you love to do, and equally important, the things you don't like doing, that will help you to narrow it down, right? And get yourself in a position. But once you do that, those things are applicable to a number of different careers and industries. My wife, for example, was an accountant, but she didn't really like public accounting and she liked people. So that's how she ended up in hotel accounting. So she ended up being able to still do accounting, but working in the hotel industry where you're around people more. So that is how people kind of think through just down to a checklist to say, okay, these are the other things that are available and open to you.
And on that note, what would be kind of some universal skill set that, well, not well, yeah, universal, like something that you would recommend all majors to have whenever they're coming in to interview?
Yeah, I think that you want to be open. I think that you want to make sure that you're curious. That whole point about asking questions is really critical. You want, as you go through that, you want to make sure that every time you step into an interview, you're going to give it 1,000%. You never want to mail it in. You never want to say, okay, yeah, I guess I got to do this. No, you got to put some discipline around yourself, which you're going to use for the rest of your life. You're going into this, it could be your new company and you're going into a meeting. You want to make sure you're prepared. You're going into your class and you got to do a presentation. You want to make sure you're prepared. It's that same skill set that you're going to use around these things that you're going to make sure that you use with this. So in order to do your presentation in your class, what are the three or four things you got to make sure you nail? The same thing is going to be that when you go in an interview. You want to make sure that you are ready to go. You're knowledgeable about the company. You're knowledgeable about the position. You also got to be ready to answer the question, why do you want this job? You got to think through the question. It says, why do I want this job? And the less generic the answer, the better. The more genuine answer, the better. That you've seen what this company has done. You're especially impressed by this event they did at in New York or Dallas or wherever, and that one was so well done that I saw that and I said, this is the kind of company that I'm interested in being involved with. Right? I've talked to countless number of interviews, and I've had people from all ends of the spectrum. I had somebody walk in and said, well, I like people. All right, I like people is not going to get you anywhere. Right? You got to be able to differentiate yourself from every other person this company is talking to. And you do that by being genuine, by being knowledgeable, by asking smart questions, and by being thoughtful in terms of what it is you say back. Words matter. Words matter. And it's important when you go through, when you do your interview, that you think about what it is you want to say. And then make sure that you effectively communicate your response back to the person on the other side. Have I convinced anybody to join the hotel industry yet?
Close. I'm currently working with a marketing agency, so I'm still exploring. But so what are some things that you would say not to do? So of course you said we need to be authentic. You need to bring all of these like really good energy. What is something that you would say, okay, like they said this, I'm not even considering them anymore?
Yeah, I think that when you go into a job interview, just like when you're talking to somebody that is important conversation, maybe it's a partner or a family member, you want to be all in, right? You want to be in on that conversation. You got to be present, right? We all know that sometimes you talk to somebody and they're distracted or they're not focused, and you want to make sure that you're all in on the conversation, right? The other thing you want to make sure that you're doing is you're making eye contact when you talk to somebody. You're having eye contact with somebody. You've had conversations with people, and if their eyes are wandering all over the place or looking over your shoulder elsewhere, that can be very distracting, and it can it be a sign or an indication that maybe you're not taking this whole conversation very seriously. So that's important to do. You want to have good body language. You're not slouching or something during the middle of your interview, etc. These things are important when you're having these conversations with people. I think relaxed, confident, poised. I mean, you want to think through those things, and that's what needs to be going through your mind. Right? Walk in the door and say, "I got this," and having a conversation with someone. Those are the kind of things that are things that, if any of those things are not happening, if somebody's distracted, if they're not making eye contact, if they're not taking the time to really think through what they're saying, those are things that all are automatically things for me that say, okay, we're not engaged here. We're not leaning in on this conversation. And that are things that immediately cause me to think twice to say, does this person really want to be here now and have this conversation?
Do you have any tips or tricks that you've used in the past, or you recommend other people to use to calm nerves before an interview and like maybe increase their confidence?
Yeah, I think everybody gets nervous before going in an interview. That's the reality of what it is. If you're on the other end, your job is to calm the person down. And that's there. And I will ask personal questions until I feel the person's calmed down. Right. And so I think one of the things you got to think through to yourself is you got to talk slowly. There is no doubt that when you're nervous, a human being talks faster. And if by nature you already talk a little faster, you are going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So you have to think to yourself to slow down and have some conversation, have practice conversation. Do not underestimate the power of standing in front of a mirror and having a conversation. Right? First of all, it's uncomfortable to stand in front of a mirror and talk, but then again, it's also uncomfortable to sometimes to sit in an interview and talk. So I think that the more that you can become more comfortable in doing something like that, you'll get the understanding of your cadence and slowing yourself down. Be careful with your hands. You can find yourself fidgeting. You can find yourself, doing all kinds of things with your hands if you're not careful, right? Your knee can be bouncing 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? You've got to go through and say to yourself that you're going to try to calm down. If you do any kind of a yoga or if you do any kind of sports, there are all kinds of things that you do to calm yourself down prior to engaging in any kind of activity. Those are great tips and tricks to be able to do. I take deep breaths before I go in, albeit it's been a while since I've actually interviewed for anything. But the last time I did, it was one of these things that you want to be sure that you're confident in. I would say to you, have a couple of stories ready to tell. You're going to be asked, there's going to be some very basic things that are going to be asked. People are going to ask you why you want the job. People are going to ask you about how it is you interact with others. Right? I love the fact that in school, you frequently get people tossed together on a project. Some some you don't know. And I love that because the point is you're being thrown together with someone else. You got to figure out how to communicate, and then you got to figure out how to work together to get to a solution. And there's nothing wrong with going through and using an example of that kind. You take this for second nature because you probably do it in most of your classes. But the reality is that's a very real world skill, is getting thrown together with peers to work on something to solve a problem. Or you are in an area and there are people in other areas and getting together to say, okay, we got this problem, how to resolve it. So I would say to yourself, have a story or two ready about what possible questions could be asked so that you can, when answered, you can go ahead and say, oh, here's what I think. Oh, and let me tell you about a time when. Because I guarantee you the guy on the other side is going to say, tell me about a time when you were asked to lead something. Tell me about a time, I ask people, I'll go through a few of the questions I ask. I ask people to tell me about what would they consider their leadership style. Tell me about how you would describe it. I ask people to tell me about how they motivate people. What do they do to inspire people? I ask people to tell me about, in a perfect world, we would all do everything that's being asked of us. In a perfect world, if you had a team, everybody would do everything you wanted them to do. But it's not a perfect world. So people don't always do what you want them to do. And when that happens, how do you handle that? Give me an example of that. Right? So most people have had some kind of job. I'm assuming all of you are working somewhere in addition to going to school. I know I had to work all the way through school to get there. But when you do that, you find yourself as part of either working on a shift or working with people, or in some cases leading a shift. And so these are all very relevant examples you can take and use. I also ask people to tell me what they do in terms of if they deal with somebody who's got a bad attitude. Because telling and working with someone who's not adding the numbers up right is one thing, or not following a process is one thing. Hey, instead of X, I want you to do it like Y. But when somebody comes in and doesn't have a good attitude, right? How do you deal with that? Because that's a little bit harder, because people can get defensive. People may not agree with you, but if you're the leader, you have to deal with it. So those are some of the questions that I ask during the course of an interview as well.
Is there any like favorite question that you have, or like creative question? Because I know I once had this question, and it was like, if you were a part of a burger, what would you be? And then you'd have to describe like how that like describes your character. So is there any questions like that like you consider
Yeah.
like your favorite?
That's funny you asked that, because I have heard of questions like that. If you were a tree, or if you're a rock, or something like that. I typically don't ask those, to be honest with you. My kind of question that I ask is, I ask people about what they did in high school, because I interview people at all levels, right? I interview some people right out of college, and then I interview people that have been in the workforce for 20 years or more. But I always ask them what they did in high school. So what extracurricular activity did you participate, if any, in high school? And I get a whole range of people that, I had the people that are super involved, that belong to every club, and were athletes. And then I have the people that, were involved in non-athletic things, but were involved in different types of organizations. It's really all associated with trying to find out whether you are part of a team or whether you're an individual performer, and finding out what is your passion. Because if you spent high school and you love being part of clubs and you love being part of, is one thing, but if you spend it and you love being, an individual performer, it's an indication of where you may not know it, but you're already indicating the types of jobs that you like more. You like more of where you're an individual performer, depending on what yourself. But if you like being on clubs or teams, hey, you like being around people more. And so a group environment might be one that you're more successful in.
Sorry, I was muted. So earlier you mentioned that you were a marketing major.
Yes,
And
I was.
so what was your journey being a marketing major to now the position that you have?
Yeah, it's funny because when I took on the role with Marriott, it was operations. So I was working at a front desk, to make money to go through college, and they offered me a job, and so I stuck around, and honestly didn't use a lot of my marketing skills for a good 15, 20 years later. Same thing. I took B Law in college, and gosh, that was tough. But all of a sudden, at one point, I started using stuff that I learned. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. As much as I whined and complained about that class, here I am using this stuff. But the reality is, in the world that we're in today, marketing is so much greater than it was when I was around. When I was around, it was a lot of print, print media, magazines. That was the outreach. And so, that the newspaper, now those things barely exist, and it's all digital. The entire world has become a platform, enormous amount of platforms that are just incredibly rich. So much so that you can subdivide your knowledge and interest into all kinds of aspects of this that is really, really important. And I think that's one of the important things. If you take a look at marketing today, and you take a look at what segment of it are you interested in, because it has gotten even so segmented that that is important for you to understand. I know in our world, we involve ourselves with a lot of companies who are out there that have made a niche by taking our product and putting it out there to other people, like people like the Expedias and the Pricelines and the, booking.coms of the world. They don't have a product. Their product is my hotel rooms, but they've created this niche by doing that. And, tremendous amount of marketing that's being done, being in a presence, being in the space that they're in. And it's a question of how do you get the consumer's attention? So, we take a look at this, and, the opportunities that I see for somebody coming out are endless, because one of the biggest challenges you're going to face is what segment of this industry that you have on the marketing that you're interested in doing, because it is so broad now that you really got to be able to narrow and focus down on what it is you've got a passion for.
Definitely. I always see there's so, like, people ask me, okay, what are you interested in marketing? And it's like, man, like, there's so much to it. It's so broad. Yeah.
Unbelievably broad. I mean, there's research and there's information out there that is forward looking. There's you're taking a look at all kinds of things that's B2B, or you're looking to B2C, and it's just so much that's out there that you've got to be able to take a look at and say, here's what I like. I would encourage you to think about the industry you like, because look, every industry markets. I mean, every single one does, right? So it is, what industry are you interested in? Kind of like the same conversation I had with my son. Where do you want to be? Well, everyone markets. So what do you have a passion for? Right? It is, like I said earlier, is it environmental passion? Find companies that are ones that fit that. Do you like to travel? There's our industry. There's you could do across any industry that's out there, but the challenge is to narrow it down to the one that you like, something that you have a passion for.
Does anyone have any more questions?
Well, listen, let me wrap up by saying a couple things. Number one, I think you guys are coming into the workplace at an absolutely fabulous time. If you would have said this a year or two ago, I would have said the exact opposite. But a lot of people have retired. A lot of people have chosen to go off into other areas. And my generation, the baby boomers, are all going to be exiting, which is going to really create a lot of opportunities. So you have a great chance at a career that can take you wherever you want to take it. It is just some of the fundamentals are always going to apply, meaning you're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to make sure that you put yourself in a position where you know more than the person next to you, that if you're going for the same job, and when you go into that interview, any little bit more than you have than somebody else has is going to put you in a position of being more successful. So I would encourage you to do, when you go in for interviews and when you start talking to people, make sure you know about the company. Like I said before, know about that interviewer. Make sure that you're walking in there and you're going to say to yourself, you want to give it your absolute best shot at this. That if that's not something you want to do, don't take the interview. Don't take the interview. Take it with, you walk in that every day, every interview going, this is the one I want. And you want to make sure that you take some others if you want to practice, to get yourself there. But you want to make sure that you bring it every time that you're going into something that you said, this is what I really want.
Thank you. Yeah, and on
All right.
campus, we actually have someone that does those practice interviews. So I hope that we can get some members to go and practice as well.
Absolutely.
Well, we're running out of time already, but we really, really, really appreciate your time with us. You made this Closure to Marketing Week great. We really appreciate you and your time, of course, like I mentioned. And hopefully we can have you coming up in other events as well. Given the hybrid approach, it's really been beneficial to us. So thank you so much.
Well, I wish you the very best on your journey. Good luck on your rest of the time in school. Enjoy this time. It's one of the best times you'll have in your life. I still have lifelong friends from when I went to school that I've stayed connected to. And again, good luck on your interviews as you go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a picture? Like a little picture. Okay. So ready?
Okay.
Yes.
All right, guys. Take care and have a great day, huh?
Okay, thank you.
Bye
Bye.
now.
You.
That was cool.
Right? I really liked it too.
It's very informational. Like it's gonna be like worth it, like to know more about it and just be more informed
Mhm.
when having an interview.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Hopefully, yeah. I wish more members came. It was so good.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see you
So
guys.
we just log out.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you,
Goodbye.
Joaquin, for coming. Guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.